Welcome to the Two Marketing Moms podcast.
Women with 50 years plus of marketing
Integrity
experience.
and culture are extremely important.
You can still say, I don't know.
Stop multitasking and be present in the
Moms
moment.
have balls, big time.
Welcome to the Two Marketing Moms podcast. We are two women with more than 50 years of marketing and advertising experience between us, and we want to talk about the struggles, the fails, and the wins that we experienced while building our careers, being a boss, juggling work and a home life, and arguably the hardest and yet most fulfilling job, being a mom. This podcast was created for marketing and advertising professionals, especially the up-and-coming marketing stars of the future. We hope these tips, tricks, and advice will help you navigate work and life and get ahead. I am so excited to hear what your top 5 are. So Kelly, take it away.
This is a struggle. I'm going to go easy. I'm going to go easy in with the early mistakes and then get the more complex ones because that's kind of how life goes. So for me, and I'm guessing for you and most of us, a lot of the mistakes that I made is kind of like when you first start driving. That's when you get in the most accidents, right?
And they seem like car crashes when they happen. When you're older, they aren't as big. They don't seem as big.
I haven't been in an accident since I was 19, 20. So that tells you something.
Says you're a good driver.
Or
Kelly.
gotten a ticket, but I did get many in my teen years. So let's start. My first couple of mistakes that I'm going to talk about are just basic mistakes that could have been caught. Okay. And I'll tell you about the first one that happened that kind of woke me up. And I was actually a traffic manager at the time at Gray Advertising. And I was, one of the accounts that I was managing was also an account that I worked on as an account person later, and that was Carl's Jr. Fast Food. And we used to be responsible for all of the materials that went inside Carl's Jr. Fast Food, all of those trans lights and Duratrans that you see that are backlit that have the hamburger of the month, and also what you would see in the drive-thru. And what people don't really know or realize, but back in the day, we used to change the hamburger of the month pretty much every month. There was a new bacon cheeseburger hamburger every month. And
I've never had one. It's not on the East Coast.
Oh, yes. Well, I probably haven't had one since because I had so many back then, but so that meant not only were we responsible for, doing the photography for all of the hamburgers and picking off all of the sesame seeds on the buns and et cetera, but also the final production of the actual materials and getting them to the actual 650 Carl's Jr. Stores. And so as a traffic manager, one of my jobs was to make sure, obviously proofing is hugely important, right? And so my job was to make sure that it was the right burger, it was the right promotion, and it was the right price, right? Which is one of the most important things. And because these things change so much, what happens is the art director used to take, the material from the previous month or the previous couple of months and then update the picture of the hamburger and then later update all the other information. And in this case, the price was not updated. So all the materials shipped to us.
Dun, dun, dun.
And the price was wrong. So instead of $199, or it was, $166, let's say, and it was the wrong price. So I get the materials and I look at them and I realize, oh my gosh, I've got 650 pieces of materials that need to get distributed to Carl's Jr. Fast Foods, and it's the wrong price. And I happened to, at the time, had a fabulous production manager who was one of my mentors, and his name was Ben Worthing. He has since passed, but he was kind of one of the early madmen in advertising in LA, and he knew everybody. And he adored me, luckily. I said, I made a mistake. It's the wrong price. What can we do? And he, one of the masters back in the day of things that we would do to fix problems, is he said, let's just print a snipe. We'll print a snipe and we'll put it on top of the translite and change the price. And, it probably cost $1,500 for us to go ahead and make that change. Client never knew. and we shipped everything out to, well, they know now, but we shipped everything out to Carl's Jr. and then where the Wiser and the promotion ran as planned. But through that experience, I really learned a couple things. One, the importance of proofing. And the second thing that I learned is the importance of having a backup in your boss. And then if you do make a mistake, there's always a way to rectify it in some way, shape, or form. Of course, the agency had to pay for the $1,500 snipe that went on there, but it saved from reproducing everything. So again, proofing extremely important, and also making sure you don't go too fast.
Yeah.
And if
Huge
you don't,
ones.
yeah, absolutely. And I might just slide right into my second one if you don't mind, because it's very, very similar. And then we'll switch. So this one was a much bigger deal than the snipe. This one was when I was in my mid-20s. I managed all national advertising for the Fairmont hotels. And at the time, Fairmont hotels had 7 locations around the country, like Boston Copley Plaza, New York, New Orleans,
DC.
Yeah. Well, DC didn't exist at that time, actually.
Oh.
Oh, wait. No, it did exist at that time.
West End. Yeah.
So we did a cross promotion with Hilton Hotels, and what it was going to be is that every week we would do an ad where Hilton Hotels would have their rates of their 7 different hotels at their 7 different locations that were the same as Fairmont Hotels locations. And so at the top of the ad, a full page ad in the San Francisco Chronicle and the New York Times, the top of the ad would have the Hilton rates in those 7 locations, and the bottom would have Fairmont Hotel rates in those locations. The next week, it would swap to Fairmont Hotel being on the top, Hilton being in the bottom, and you can guess what happened. So when we actually finished the project, I was account executive, and usually in the buck stops with the account executive. The account executive's job to make sure that everyone signed everything, that everything's approved. And so I get a call on a Sunday morning early from the head of our agency, and he said, "Have you looked at the San Francisco Chronicle?" And I said, "No." He said, "The Fairmont Hotels has the Hilton rates and vice versa. Go find out what happened." So I go to the office thinking, there's no way I signed this. There can't be a proof somewhere that says that I signed this. I never would have made such a mistake. And I go back and look through the traffic files. And of course, my signature's on it, along with the art director, the copywriter, and everyone else on the team.
Oh no.
It was a situation where we were pushing through so many ads in a day. And that's when you make mistakes, because your eyes blur. You don't see things because you're so close to it. And we should have not done everything for a 6-week period in one day. We should have, done 1 week and the one next day, for example, or had someone else look at it that wasn't a part of our team.
Yeah. I mean, everyone on the team assumed when you're doing that volume, they assumed that the other person would have caught it too.
Yeah. So, lesson learned on both these things: slow down, don't rush. Even though you might be in a rush, figure out a way to be able to take a step back and proof things and have someone review things that are not close to the project, because these typos and these mistakes can, really cost these companies revenue and money. And it also demonstrates the importance of the traffic department to be a backup. And a lot of companies don't even have traffic anymore, to make sure that, that's another person who's making sure that everyone signs everything and looks at it and is a stopgap. So those are my 2 early career typo mistakes. And I want to throw it back to you to get yours.
Well, I have, my first one was a typo mistake too, but I think, and I won't tell the story because it's just silly. It was just a typo in a report. And, luckily it was with the client meeting, but I had a tendency to, at the time, because I was so young, to any mistake or anything that was, that someone pointed out as a mistake, I would take so personally and feel like a failure. I had churned out this 50-page report, which was so awesome. And there was one little teeny tiny typo in it. And, that kind of made me learn that, you have to just apologize and move on and go try to find a way to fix it. And not to dwell on it, and that it's, I didn't realize at the time that there's almost always a solution for everything, especially in our industry. Like you just said, like creating the snipe, you find a solution. So that was my number one. Okay, so my number two is a good one, because this one especially will speak to people that are kind of like starting off their careers, or, they have a team of people that they work with, and, if they go to meetings or if they're working on a project, they're not necessarily the lead. So they're not necessarily in the hot seat, right?
Yeah.
So I went to this meeting with my boss, and there was maybe 35, 40 people in the room, including the CEO of our client, all the major VPs. There were some other outside partners. And at the time, I just kind of saw my role as like supporting, like I'm going to be there to take notes, blah, blah, blah. And we were talking about a concept, and I wasn't at the table. I was kind of seated around the room. So again, I did not feel like I had an important role in this meeting. So I'm kind of like, not really paying attention-ish, just like there's so many people talking, and anyways. And then someone goes, "Julia, what do you think?" And I was like, oh, fill in the blank in my head. Like I had not formed an opinion because I assumed that my opinion did not count.
Wow.
Because I wasn't the lead on the account. I was the support person. And of course I kind of recovered. It was kind of lame. The opinion I gave, it wasn't truly how I felt. I actually thought the concept was terrible.
Well, you can never say that.
I know, but I mean, imagine if I had said that.
Yeah.
It would have actually saved us like 2 months of work and going back and forth to actually fit. The conclusion was that the concept was terrible after like 2 months, but no one wanted to say it. Anyways, I think the lesson I learned was that if I wanted to grow in my position, I had to pretend like I was the lead, and I had to be, even if I was in the back of the room, I needed to have an opinion, and be able to interject at any point in a conversation. And especially from the client perspective, I mean, they're paying for everyone from the agency in the room, not just the lead. And so therefore everyone should have an opinion. Maybe he thought that what I had said truly was my opinion. I felt totally caught off guard. Like I had my pants down or something. But I think it's important advice for anyone, no matter your age, right? Because not everyone's the lead on a project all the time.
I think
so
that's
that was
really important.
Yeah, that was one that like just that typo still haunts me to that day. And that we were in a presentation, and actually anyways, I won't go into who actually was presenting that concept because it was another partner agency, but it was all terrible. But those really stuck out in my head. Okay. How about your third mistake?
So this one's a little bit more complex, and there's a definitive message for this particular one. Years ago, I was at another agency, and I was working on a pitch for the Metropolitan Transit Authority, MTA, and they're the ones that run the New York City subway system, the trains, the buses, etc. And we were in orals. And as part of the orals presentation, they gave us a list of 5 questions that we had to answer, and we were co-presenting with another agency. And I thought, I was responsible for, say, 3 questions out of the 5. And I thought a great way for us to answer the questions would be for us to do a whiteboard animation. And it would, not just answer the questions in a PowerPoint, it would be entertaining. It would be, we would record it in a voice, and we had, wonderful animation that would explain how we recommend the future of marketing and advertising for the MTA. So we were really excited. We came up with a really great concept. And again, this is not new creative. It's just answering questions, right? It's just another way of answering a question of how you might do it in a creative way in a pitch situation. And so we were ready to farm it out. And one of our internal staffers, creative people, said he knows how to do this and he would do it. So we said, great. Well, again, this is one of those last minute things where
like happens with pitches, especially.
Yeah. So he basically had maybe 48 hours to finish this thing.
Oh, wow.
And it went so far close to the wire that he actually didn't finish it until we actually got into the room of the presentation. And I had seen bits of it. I had seen it, so I knew it was good. But we knew right as we were about to walk in there that obviously this was a danger. And so the VP, and I'll never forget this, and I will always learn from it, said, okay, and he was very calm. He said, we got to have a plan B. And we had the VO recorded, but we also had screen grabs of what each of the animations were going to look like. And so he quickly put together a PowerPoint of what each of the animations were going to look like with the VO behind it. And so my job and our plan B very quickly, like very, very last minute, was if the video doesn't happen, he will play the VO and I will play each of the slides as they go, because I knew what slides to push when. So we get in the room. It's our time to present. The client said, we've been having problems with internet.
Oh, no.
And so, we don't, just letting you know. I'm like, okay, well, we're going to try to access this video that we developed through the internet. So I go in to get the video and on YouTube, and it's marked private. So I can't access it. So, however, the client had just said the internet, something was wrong with the internet. So instead I said, well, gosh, we worked so hard on this video and we're really excited to share it with you, but it seems like the internet's not working.
Oh,
so we're going to have
excuse.
So we're going to have to email it to you later. And instead made a joke of it and said, we've got some screen grabs in the audio, so we'll play it that way, but we're really hoping you listen to this later. And so we did it and we got through it. Obviously it wasn't as dynamic, the actual video, but all the women in the room just went, oh, and they felt so bad for me that I didn't have the video. But we won the business.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know if it had anything to do with the fact that the video didn't play and they felt bad for us. I'm quite sure it didn't, but it was one of those scenarios where you have to have a plan B. You cannot rely on technology. There's so many different instances where internet goes out, something happens, audio wigs out, you name it. And I never go into a presentation without a hard copy. People think I'm crazy, but there's a very specific reason, because I can name 5 to 8 different times where it hasn't worked. And this is one instance where it was really important and it didn't work. And thank God for the VP ahead of me who had the idea to let's jerry rig it, and it worked. And we did it. But very big learning that you must have a plan B and not count on technology to work.
Oh, that's a good one. I can't even believe I didn't have one of those, because I've had so many tech issues that I've had to deal with. And I agree. Recently, actually, on a Zoom, I was giving a presentation on a Zoom and my internet just turned off. So I was kicked out of the meeting. And so then I got onto the Zoom on my cell phone using cellular data, but it meant that I didn't have any of my slides and I actually hadn't printed them out. And so I was going from memory and, oh man, that was a struggle. Yeah. So plan B, 100%. That's a great. Yeah. Okay. Another one of mine, kind of following up on the, like always having an opinion, is also about taking notes. So I had a client once, she was just this really different person. Like she was just kind of like a boho chic kind of girl, very laid back. And I have never once in the, years that I worked with her, never once saw a pen in her hand.
Interesting.
She never had a piece of paper on her desk either.
Okay.
And so when like over time, we realized every time we would go into a meeting with her that if we didn't take notes for her and send her a follow-up, like she was just basically never going to do anything because she did not take notes. And why her boss never mentioned this to her, especially after like a year or two, we like it became an inside joke, like how she just got away with just like floating around the office from meeting to meeting, holding absolutely nothing. So like the learning lesson there is, and again, like especially when you're young and you're new to a team, like you can be an asset by taking really awesome notes and being a person who documents and is available to fill in the little details for people that, you know, might have been leading a meeting or answering the tough questions and didn't get to do and didn't, you know, get to write down these things or remember them. So you can be an asset in that way. Also, I think, you know, in my 20s, I also was like kind of embarrassed to be writing so much down, but I'd be like, oh, that person like said something so genius. And I was embarrassed to want to literally record conversations, you know? And then I realized, no, write it down.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I have all my notebooks from all time, and I still sometimes go back and look at them because I love a pen and a paper. I've never really tried to make it all digital. I just want a pen and a paper, and I can write so fast.
Yeah.
And record things. Like sometimes clients or people I'm working with say the most genius things. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to let that go. So just not being timid in terms of recording things. You know, I also had a coworker who would go into meetings and had like a little sign on his notebook that he was recording this meeting. So he let everyone know in advance, like, I am recording this. If you were uncomfortable, you could obviously tell him not. But like, so he had like real meeting notes, right? Like how we record Zooms, like, and he could go back and listen to the conversations people had because, you know, he was a creative. And so anyways, note taking. I don't have like a disaster story about it, but I feel like that could lead to some people not making mistakes by doing that.
Well, and if you don't take notes, especially as a junior person, then it's almost like you're not listening. And right. I think there's another counter to that. I've watched tech people take notes on their phone, and you have to be careful with that because that also looks like, what are they surfing?
Yes, totally.
You know, you don't really realize that they may be taking notes. So that's something you would have to qualify if you're using a digital, you know, a lot of people just pull out their laptops and start doing it. And that's also kind of disruptive.
Yes, it totally is, because then you can get a message on Slack or, you know, like your email dings and you want to go listen to it, but you really need to be plugged in, which is why I love pen and paper. Even though it takes twice as long, right? Because if I do meeting notes or if I do follow up, I actually have to transfer it.
Well, I'm convinced, I am definitely convinced that the act of writing something down helps with memory, and you don't get that the same way that you would when you're typing it.
Agreed.
Because especially like in college, I remember I used to be able to remember my notes. Not that I have a perfect visual, you know, photographic memory, but I would remember exactly where I wrote down a specific piece of information and how I wrote it down. I knew where to find it. And that's really important for memory's sake, being able to, and I wonder how that's going to impact completely different subject. You know, kids today, they might not realize that that's a really good memory tool, to be able to write things down. And because you've written it down, you're going to remember it in your own handwriting.
Oh yeah. I know we're all like, if I remember something, I'm like, ooh, it's in that notebook from 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of crazy like that. It's like notebooks and pens are my thing.
Yep.
Okay. What's your next mistake?
This is a generic mistake, and I'm curious to see if you agree. And this is an across the board thing that I see in advertising at every single agency that I've ever worked for. And it's a mistake I do not want to make again. And what it is I have never, ever won a piece of new business with unsolicited creative. It's a waste of time.
Ooh.
It's a waste of money. And the only reason to do it is if it's an existing client that you happen to know really well and you're trying to keep the business, you know their strategy. But going into a new business pitch and bringing in creative just because you had this grand idea, which happens all the time, has never, ever won a piece of business that I recall ever. So save your time, save your money, focus on the strategy, but don't present creative. How do you feel about that?
Oh man, you're making me really jog my memory. Trying to remember where we did unsolicited. There was one pitch where we did, we threw in concepts and we didn't know enough to make it a great idea. And so it fell flat. We also didn't know like the personality of the client, like what would really appeal to them. We were really taking a chance. I feel like oh my God, we have to do another episode about just new business stuff because there's so many little nuancy things about new business, like do's and don'ts.
Let's do that.
And I think that one's a valid one. I'll come back to you in a few episodes when I've really jogged my memory.
Yeah, if you've won one, then you let me know. But I cannot recall one that I have. I have in retaining business because I know what their strategy is.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and also, should we be doing creative for pitches? That's also a topic for another day, right?
Agreed.
Okay, my next mistake is also maybe a little generic too, but learning when to say I don't know.
Oh, I love that.
I feel like, and this is for anyone of any age at any point in your career. Like, I really dislike being in meetings where someone has asked a question and the person feels obligated to give an answer like they know what they are talking about. And when they could have just said, I don't know, or I don't think so, or
I'll get back to you.
Like, oh man, it's on my pet peeve list, actually. I think it's totally legit to not know 100% and to be upfront and honest that you don't know the answer. A lot of the times, like sometimes people ask me questions and I'm already like, the meeting is fast paced and I'm already like, my brain is in one lane and they're taking me to another lane and I just can't think of an answer. And I'll say, like, I don't know right now, but I will definitely follow up with an email. And I always can think much clearer after the meeting is ended and come up with probably a million times better answer than I could if I just like spitballed and made it up.
Sure.
And like, I know a lot of people talk about like imposter syndrome. And I think that my way of, never really feeling like I've suffered from that is by being upfront that I don't know everything. Like, obviously there's gray area, right? We all do new things that we may be in our comfort zone out, something that's new that we don't have experience with, but still, you can still say, I don't know.
Excellent.
So there you go. There's my fourth mistake.
All right. So we're moving on to number 5, the last, 9 and 10, right?
9 and 10.
All right. So this last one for me is more of a difficult, challenging one. I went with the easy ones and I kind of built up to the hardest ones. And I've talked a little bit about this before, and it's office politics. And it's one of my massive pet peeves and one of my things that as a boss, I try to minimize as much as possible. And the only way you can minimize that is by being transparent. But I think the main thing is a huge part of it is culture. When you're, you are a boss or you are in a position where you're managing people, making sure that the people around you feel confident in their jobs. You don't want people to feel like they could lose their job tomorrow pending XYZ. And I was in a situation in a company that regularly laid off employees at least twice a year.
Whoa.
And in some cases, 4 times a year, based on how income came in. And that's just the way that particular company was run. And I was part of senior management. And so every quarter or twice a year, I'd get called in, and along with some of my peers in senior management, and we were asked, okay, who should we let go of now? Numbers are down, who's vulnerable, who's not performing well, who's not utilization that's very big, who's not being 85% utilized.
Wow.
And in essence, we were asked to give up a name.
Yeah.
And when you're in a microcosm like that, it starts to become like high school.
Like I was going to say toxic.
Well, yes, toxic, but it starts to become like every man for himself.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I'm going to give you a name because I don't want my name to come up.
Right, of course.
And the problem with that is that eventually your name's going to come up, and you're not going to be one of the people in the room. And I made the mistake of giving up names because I felt like I had to, and I regretted it. And eventually my name did come up, and I was one of the people that was let go. And out of that, I just realized that type of environment is not an environment, A, I ever want to work in again, or B, that I ever want to be responsible for. I don't want people to feel like they're going to be let go. I don't want people to feel like, if we had a bad month, that someone's got to go.
Yeah.
And that's the rough part about advertising is, of course, like any company, we're dealing with income, and income ebbs and flows. But to a certain extent, as a leader in a company, you need to make sure that your employees feel comfortable, feel confident, feel secure, feel stable. And even if there are issues, yes, I'm all for transparency, but you have to be able to figure out how to keep that stability in mind. And when you bring other people into the play to make them responsible for picking names out of a hat, it's not in an environment where most people are going to thrive.
Yeah. And you can have a great culture outside of that, but that one thing is will then infiltrate everything else eventually.
Absolutely.
Wow. That's rough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our industry is definitely hard. As I grow my business, I'm very careful about that, right? Because anyone that I work with I feel very responsible for.
Oh, sure.
Their livelihood, their happiness. Obviously not all of it, but that is a tricky one. Okay, my last one kind of circles back to your first two, Kelly, actually.
Oh.
And it's really about creating systems and protocols to make sure that you don't get, one, when you're dealing with high volume of work, it can become very overwhelming. Two, when you have a team of people where, maybe they're really reviewing things, or maybe they're not. Or you're doing things in a repetitive nature, and that opens you up to making more mistakes, just like little tiny mistakes that get through, right? And so like one of the things that I've been working on lately is like setting up wikis and protocols for a lot of my work, because a lot of what I do, do follow the same protocols, the same step-by-steps to get to the finished work. Obviously, every project is different, but when you set those up, you have the framework to make sure things that are consistent and you don't make mistakes. So basically the story is like, I was again, young and hungry and setting up this like brand new HTML email system for a client, which allowed us to do like email automation before like email automation was like a real thing. And I was setting it all up and just got so excited. I never had anyone proof. I never had any discussions with how things would work. I never created any flows. I was just like doing it in my head. And somehow I thought this was okay. And I ended up, the first email I ever sent, ended up sending it to a group of people, half of which really should have gotten a different email. So it wasn't like a disaster. It wasn't like a disaster, right? But like looking back on it, I'm like, yeah, those protocols and guides and really thinking through having something on paper or, you know, digitally set up so that you have those like internal checks and balances, can help prevent mistakes. It's always the little ones that get us.
It's true.
They bite.
It's true.
So there you go. Look at us.
That's 10.
Well, thanks everyone. We hope that these 10 things are, if they're things that you've experienced, you feel some camaraderie with us, or you're able to think through some situations that you might be going through or might encounter in the future, and
or learn from our mistakes.
Yes, and learn from them.
That's why you talk about them. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So with that, we're signing off. We'll see you next time.
Take care.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a podcast review or send us a message at twomarketingmoms.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.